Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. I think if anything shows how Ali Baba is so unfit to be the leader of Scotland, it was his, let's just say, tribute to all those who died 35 years ago on Pan Am 103, Flight 103, when it was blown up out of the air by a Muslim terrorist. I can't say the word. They don't like the word on YouTube. Tourist. Terrorist. And he described it as an air disaster. It was not an air disaster. It was an act of murder by a Muslim fundamentalist on the orders of a mad Muslim regime under Gaddafi. This was not a disaster in the same way as the Titanic was a disaster, as the Ibrox Stadium collapse was a disaster, as wildfires are a disaster. This was a deliberate act by people just like Humza Yousaf. So, of course, he daren't say otherwise because the guys at the mosque won't like it. It goes to show who's running Scotland. We'll take a look at this because there's a lot of people not happy with how he describes it, and he is facing a major backlash which he must address. But I bet he doesn't, because Kendall doesn't have the balls to tell the truth. Here goes. So Ali Baba torn to shreds over his pathetic statement on the Lockerbie bombing. The man cannot come out and say what it was, because he is what it was. He's a part of the same gang. It's his gang what done it. So of course he can't come out and say that it was a bad thing, it was a terrible thing, it was an awful thing, because that would be going against his gang, and his gang don't like it when you go against his gang. They do terrible things to people like him if they come out and say against it, don't they? And so he's had to try and change the narrative. It was now a disaster. It wasn't, according to him, an act of murder perpetrated by a Muslim tourist. No. Can't say that, can you? You just can't say that, because you know that it wouldn't look good for someone like you. Your gang. Commentator Niall Gardner blasted a statement issued from the First Minister's X account which described the Lockerbie bombing as an air disaster. This wasn't two planes crashing in the air accidentally. This wasn't, if those who are old enough to remember, which obviously is most of you, to be honest, I'll look at my my stats, but the Canary Islands back in the mid-70s, when a plane taking off, and the 747 taking off, hit a 747 on the ground, and there was like nearly 600 people killed. That's an air disaster. Having a Muslim tourist blowing up something in mid-air, that's not a disaster. It's an act of murder. Ali Baba has been criticised after a tweet describing the Lockerbie bombing as an air disaster and not a tourist attack. Niall Gardner, a political analyst, took to X after a message appeared on the Scottish First Minister's account on Thursday. Mr Yousaf's tweet said, on the 35th anniversary of the Lockerbie air disaster, Mr First Minister Ali Baba has expressed sympathies to those who lost loved ones on board Pan Am Flight 103 and on the ground. He doesn't care. One of his lot did it, and that's all that matters to him. He said he also paid tribute to the emergency workers and others who responded in the immediate aftermath. And in the response, Mr Gardner shared the post and commented, "What a pathetic statement from this terrible man." He said this was a tourist attack, not an air disaster. That tweet prompted some very strong support from critics of the First Minister, with one ex-user replying, "Very naughty, very wrong person in the job. Time for a high jump. Time for a change. Time now that people see what they've got as a leader. A man who is so obsessed with his third world backward barbarism that he refuses to call things that which they are. A man who wants to make Scotland very much like the third world backward barbaric country whence his culture emerged, perhaps. Certainly not a man fit to be leading a modern Western democracy. Not with his set of ideologies. A second replied, he is the most awful man. But others pointed out that official memorials to the Lockerbie bombing also described what happened as an air disaster. But it is not a disaster. It is a criminal act. A disaster indicates that something happened outside of control. This was definitely human-made. All 259 passengers and crew were killed, including 35 students from the University of Syracuse, along with 11 Lockerbie residents, when Pan Am 103 exploded over the Scottish town of Lockerbie on December the 21st, 1988, in what remains the deadliest attack in British history. The victims were of 21 different nationalities and 190 were American. After all, that was who they were aiming at. That's who the Muslims were aiming at when they did this act. Scotland's First Minister paid tribute on Thursday to what he called incredible courage shown by the community and emergency services after the bombing on its 35th anniversary. Yousaf, speaking in Holyrood ahead of the First Minister's question, paid tribute to those in the area. He said, "Can I also add my thoughts and indeed my prayers? I don't want your prayers. Your prayers are to a God that is not the God of the people who died in that plane." Let's be honest about that. They all say, oh, it's the same God. But I can prove it most certainly isn't. Because for most people in Scotland, they are Christian or Christian raised, maybe atheists now, but they still come from a Christian-centric country. And that God has a child. Whatever God Humza Yousaf chooses to pray to cannot possibly be the same God, because his God does not have a child and is therefore not the same God. So we don't want your prayers. What we want is your resignation and then your total absolution as you leave politics forever. I can't get over the fact that he said it was an air disaster. It's not an air disaster. Anyway, he should go. He should resign. Anyway, he said, I spoke to the local MP, David Mundell, actually just this week. He said, and both of us were reflecting on the incredible courage that we saw, not just from the emergency services, but from the local communities. What he did also say, I think, under his breath perhaps, was, and the man who done it. Certainly, that's what he believes. Many of them, he said, their stories are not known, they're not named, but through their courageous action ensures that there's an enduring bond between families that are impacted both here in Scotland and those in the United States and across the world. He says, my thoughts continue to be all of those who feel that loss. No, they're not. You never think of them at all. You lying fucker. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross also paid tribute, saying, my thoughts and prayers, and I'm sure those with the whole chamber, are with the families, friends and those in Lockerbie community itself who fell victim to this senseless act of awfulness perpetrated by someone in Humza Yousaf's gang. Labour leader Anna Sarwar, another one in Humza's gang, said on Thursday, I'd like to extend my deepest sympathies to the families who lost their loved ones in the Lockerbie tragedy 35 years ago. Again, another one, not really someone who ought to be commenting on this, since it was his gang what done it. He said, blah, 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 we don't care about that. Anyway, a memorial service was held to mark the anniversary, led by Jeff Brown, moderator of the Presbytery of Annandale and Eskdale. He said, we remember all those taken in a senseless act 35 years ago. We remember the outpouring of love that continues today from the people of Lockerbie and the surrounding area to those in Syracuse and all the other countries. Then there was a minute's silence and local dignitaries turned up. It was a terrible thing, of course, but it was perpetrated by his gang. And then he sits there and refuses to call it what it is. The man does not represent the people of Scotland. Who he represents is a very much smaller subset of people living in Scotland. Certainly not Scots. I'm coming up. I'm quite prepared to forgive and forget and things like that. And had the Grand Leaderine of Scotland come out and said and called it by what it was, he would not now be facing all of this. Even he must realise you can't call something an air disaster when it was a criminal act of murder by someone very much like him. For him to come out as someone of that gang and try and obfuscate and change the words and change the terminology so that he can try and draw attention away from what it was, it seems a bit unforgivable, I think. He's got to own up. He's got to say, yes, it was someone who believes in the same strange God I believe in, the same someone from a culture that is alien to Scotland, who did this to the people of Scotland, that alien culture of which I am a member. And now I'm not going to sit here and change the words and change everything and hide everything to make it look as though I'm not part of that murderous cult. But that's not what he said. That's not what he said, is it? And he tried to hide it and shame it. Oh, let's change it. Let's change the words. Let's change the meaning. Let's try and gloss over what was happening and that I'm a member of that gang. And that's basically what he's done. Because he dared say the truth because the other gang members don't like it. There we go. And that's who's leading Scotland. Well done. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. I've probably upset a few people, but I don't care. It's how I feel, and it is how I think a lot of people feel that this man should not be saying things like that. If he's going to speak on it at all, he must tell the truth. But again, it's the SNP. What the hell is the SNP got to do with the truth? Till next time, stay safe, stay well. I will speak to you later. I have one video left to do today, outside of anything emergency flash videos, but it's not a newsy one. It's just a little one for just to put some news across. So keep an eye out for that one. Anyway, till next time, goodbye.